Thanks very much. I'm Mark Backler. I've worked in the games industry for about 10 years at companies like Lionhead, EA and Marmalade. I started off working on Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix as a scripter using C++, and then went to work on Fable 2 at Lionhead, where we used Luug. I then moved through a couple of different design positions. Most recently, I was lead designer at Marmalade, and then left to work full-time on this game, Lost Words, which was originally called The Last Word. And this is Audrey Prophet, who's the programmer on the game. She's previously worked at Whispering Gibbon on a bunch of different titles there. And if you know those guys now, they're doing the really awesome 3D printing technology for games, so you can kind of capture images and models from lots of different types of game and really easily 3D print. So I've been coming to Luug for quite a few years now, and one of the best talks I think I've seen was when Mike Bithell was showing Thomas Was Alone kind of before it was released, and you got a sneaky behind-the-scenes view, and you got to see how he'd set up his project and everything. Me being quite nosy, I enjoyed seeing that. So we'll have a look in our Unity project file in a bit, and people can yell out if they want us to look at anything in particular. We've been working on the title. I started it for the Luug Game Jam about 3 years ago now, and I did it in Game Maker to begin with, and then after the weekend I really liked the concept, and so I wanted to remake it in something that gave us more control and power and flexibility, so we decided to use Unity. Do you want to just run the trailer of the game so people can see what it's all about? So yeah, it's like a 2D platformer inside a diary, and players are having to collect these scraps of paper in order to transition to the next page, and you're solving puzzles using these word scraps on the page. So the idea at the moment is you're collecting these scraps of paper and they're going together to form the torn pages of a story. We are going to tweak that, but I'll just show you the current version now because it's a slightly old trailer we have. So when you've collected enough of those scraps of paper, they all come together and you get to transition into this fantasy world that the girl's been writing about. So in this section, you're not walking on the words, but you are using them to interact with the world in different ways, like you can see here. And then you transition back into the diary to solve a bunch of other puzzles to piece together the next page, and the chapters progress on like that. You can also make choices by dragging certain words into place. So here, choosing the name of the protagonist that then gets used in the game. Yeah, and there's lots of different ways that you're using the words to affect your environment. So we've now updated the name, and so I also wanted to talk a bit about the funding of the game, so I thought it might be interesting for some people working on their own projects here, because to begin with, I ended up quitting my job because we were offered some funding from Kuju startups. So because I had that in place, seemed like a good time to go full-time on the game. But then there was a couple of things I wasn't sure about with the funding, and I ended up turning it down to try and work further on the project and get some other funding, which I eventually did. It did take a little while longer than I expected because I was sort of working on the title for about 6 months to a year before we had the funding in place. And it's one of those funny things of you kind of have stuff that seems like it's going to go through, but you're never 100% sure. So we ended up speaking to the Wellcome Trust, who do development grants for video game titles. They've been working with Ninja Theory on their title Hellblade. And they're also working with a bunch of smaller games companies as well. So yeah, as long as you sort of have a scientific angle that you can work with researchers for, then yeah, they can fund you for different amounts. We then also applied for Creative England, and they've just opened their next round of funding, so that's worth applying for. You can get up to £50,000 kind of as a risk-free loan from those guys. Yeah, just quickly I would say about getting funding. I think there's probably 4 key things that you want to look for. I know some people who've had games funded when they haven't really had anything developed for it at all, and they've just had some really amazing concept art. So that's kind of a big thing for when you're going to publishers and investors and people. You really want to kind of blow their socks off with what the game's going to look like. Then a really solid prototype is really going to help you out, something that people can actually play, whether it's kind of rough around the edges and it just shows the basic mechanics, if it's kind of a game that can shine through the mechanics alone. It also depends who you're talking to, because some people, you probably want a really small section of the game, but just polish it as much as you can and get it looking as good as possible. Because lots of people in the games industry either can or think they can kind of look through a prototype and just see, you know, is it a fun experience, is it doing what you want? But often it's actually a really hard thing to do, and to see where a game is going to end up, because you just don't know what level people are going to be able to get it to. So yeah, like the better you can make your prototype, the more luck you're going to have with getting funding. Then a team, like the more people with experience and kind of who've worked on things relevant to your project, the better really. It's something all investors are going to be interested in. And then finally there's the really great phrase of, if you want funding, ask for advice, and if you want advice, ask for funding, which I think is really true, because a lot of the times we've kind of got funding for stuff, it's been through kind of not the avenues that I would have expected. And another thing from Mike's talk about Thomas Was Alone was when he was saying about getting Danny Wallace involved with the project. Yeah, you never really think to just go and ask someone with a great reputation like that. You don't really know if they're going to be interested in working with you. But when we were first working on the game, I did a game jam, and Rhianna Pratchett was one of the judges there. It's the Space Ape Game Jam. My friends and I were lucky enough to win the game jam, and sort of got in contact with her through that, and also Kuju had suggested that we speak to her. If it was just me on my own, I probably wouldn't have ever thought of approaching her, but because we'd had these sort of people we're working with who were thinking it was a good idea, we went for it, and she was interested in working on the project with us, so now she's writing the story for the game. So yeah, I think that's one lesson I've learned time and time again while working on this, kind of you don't ask, you don't get, and there's a lot of things, whether it's sort of a discounted rate on an event, or booth space, or tons of different things. You just really have to kind of swallow your pride and ask for stuff, not worry about what's going to happen, just see what you can do. Do you want to open up Unity, and we will just have a look at how the project is set up. If there's anything people want to know about it, please just yell out or ask us now before you forget. So originally I kind of had a whole bunch of different scenes, like each page of the diary was a different scene. I quite like that because I could sort of easily skip between them, but then we figured it might actually be better to have the diary pages in chunks, so now there's kind of the first section of diary pages is all in one scene, and then it's kind of a game object that you use that we enable and disable things on, and then when you go into the story section, that's a different scene. and then when you come back into the diary, the next sort of chunk of levels is another scene. Is it more efficient like that?
I think that I thought when I saw the project that there is no reason to have 10 different scenes that have the same exact background and they work with the exact same way with the animation and everything. So that's why I thought it was better to have in one scene all the parts that are together, for example, the first levels of the diary.
Mm-hmm.
So we can have the background and the animation that's exactly the same all together.
That's cool. And so I've started using a couple of shaders like we're using for the lighting in the story world with kind of the god rays and stuff. We've got a just using the Unity out of the box kind of light shaft shader. We're looking into creating some other ones. There's been a few suggestions from people on different ways that we might be able to use shaders to enhance the look of the game. It's not something I know loads about though. Alan Zacconi, I don't know if you've seen his shader tutorials. They seem really excellent for sort of beginner to advanced levels. He was suggesting we use a shader for the scraps of paper, because it's one problem we've been having of we're kind of scaling the different scraps at the moment, which doesn't look great. So we have an option for sort of different lengths of word. We could either use lots of different actual sprites for the scraps and just kind of use them determined on how long the word is, or we can maybe use like 9 slicing technique, so we can scale it and have it looking like really sharp for any resolution, but then perhaps even using some kind of shader might be a better way of doing it. But it's something for us to look into. We're using a few different plugins for the project, so wanted to take a quick look at TextMesh Pro. So we were just using the 3D text objects to begin with in Unity. I did try moving over to the Canvas system, but because we want the text to be kind of something that you can walk on and interact with, that didn't seem like the best way to do it. But then the 3D text was not actually all that sharp when we tried getting it in both the diary and the story scene. So we tried playing around with different fonts, and then I think scaling up, is it the text size really high but the font size really small, something like that, and kind of playing around with all the different numbers to get it looking as sharp as possible. But ultimately we found that we'd heard lots of good stuff about TextMesh Pro, so we thought we would give that a try, which seems to have really helped, and we've got much sharper resolution on the text. And there's also cool things we can do, like having text that's kind of hidden, which isn't working right now, but having stuff that's hidden by darkness, and then you illuminate it when you drag the text over, so we can have all sorts of like interesting messages and instructions written in the background, and sort of things about Easter eggs or secret collectibles and things that you're only going to find when you're dragging the word over the environment. Doesn't matter if it's not going to work this time, it's fine. So then one interesting problem we've been facing with this game is localization. I know there's a couple of other games that have had kind of slight similar issues, but because we use text that you're actually walking on, when we localize something, it's probably going to be a different length, which is actually going to change the design of the level and provide us with a few unique problems. Like we've got a example Russian translation here, so we've got one section that's actually longer, and then on the other side it's actually shorter, and also the position of the word, like we can't rely on the movable word like gran here being at that section of the sentence in every language. Like in Russian, it's moved to the end of the sentence. So we've been looking into a bunch of different ways that we can kind of solve this as automatically as possible, but I think ultimately we're going to need human eyes like me or someone else to kind of go through and look at each level, but Audrey has come up with an excellent solution. We've been using the smart localization plugin for that, so that we can kind of generate all the text from a spreadsheet, isn't it?
Yes. And then we try to save for each language the position of the word and the text, the size of the font. So we try to fit as best as we can to the original one.
Yeah, so hopefully we can then just generate all of the text, and then it will just be a quick pass going through. We've also got it so we've got square brackets on any of the words that we want to be interactive and on the scraps of paper. So we shouldn't have to go through manually setting that. Like if we work with the localizers and they know that how to set extra lines and how to set words to be interactive, then we should be able to get as much done in the first pass as possible, and then it's just kind of a sanity check and moving things around. But yeah, no doubt it will still be pretty tricky to customize everything for each language, and it might just be sort of a case of sitting down with a localizer from each territory to work with them, because we're going to kind of need localizer/game designers in a way. Some people have just said it's going to be a nightmare to do and don't worry about it and just localize later. But I think if you can release in as many territories as possible, certainly like eFigs are the main ones, but then I guess it's just worth looking into the regions that you think your game could potentially be really popular in. And I guess that's one thing about if you do release not doing too many languages first, you can kind of see what regions you're still getting a reasonable number of downloads in, and then you can always localize those versions and roll that out later. So we've been looking at video rendering in Unity as well, because one thing we want to do to get the game looking really unique is we've kind of got a 3D model at the moment of the diary, and we just have a simple animation of the page turn. But I really love games like Lumino City, when they've got kind of the real, use real paper and lighting and everything, because it's really hard to capture that sort of effect otherwise. So we wanted to get a real diary and film it with turning the page without sticking our hands in the way, which is going to be a tricky thing. So it might be a lo-fi solution of kind of using some cotton and having that stretched across and people far enough away from the camera so we're not getting their shadows in it. But we also want to have a 3D bedroom scene that transitions into the diary. We've got a placeholder thing for it at the moment. So kind of getting these two approaches to work together could be tricky, because I don't really know how we could smoothly go from a kind of virtual 3D bedroom into the footage of a diary on the desk. We might need to sort of use some kind of fade or something there, or perhaps something on the desk with normal maps. We could try and get the video to look like it has some depth to it. And yeah, one thing in developing this project that I've found has been super important is just to be playtesting it the whole time. It was really handy early on when I had the Game Jam game that I could kind of put in front of people, and half of the things in the game have kind of come from seeing how people react to it and sort of getting inspirations when they're actually playing as well. Also, people often come up with really interesting suggestions when they're actually playing the game and say, hey, wouldn't it be cool if you could do this thing? So then we go and add that into the game. And yeah, that continuous feedback is just really important. And once you implement something as well, you need to see how people react to it, because quite often it's not the way that you expect they're going to interact with things. Like Bossa have been doing, we've got our own debug stuff for the character. Do you want to run the scene? So yeah, it's just to kind of track what's going on. Cool. Yeah, so we're using Raycast as well at the moment. We've played around with a couple of different systems for the collision checking, but Raycast seems to be the best one. We've added in 2 raycasts at the moment, but I think we're probably going to do a third one down the middle because we were getting some issues, weren't we?
And the platform is too small and don't have the raycast on.
Yeah, so yeah, often you would kind of jump and the game wasn't being forgiving enough. I think people often think that they can jump later than they actually should be able to, but if you're generous, then it actually feels like the game is being fair, even though it's being way too generous. We've also added in a gravity curve for the player. We're still sort of, messing around with the movement of the character, but a friend of mine recommended using a curve like this so that we can sort of modify the gravity, because often if you sort of adjust it so you've got sort of a lot of power to begin with and then it eases off, it can feel a lot nicer, and then you kind of have more pull at the end. But it's something we definitely want to play around with, because that sort of balancing is really important for making just the player movement feel really nice and kind of has a high level of game feel, I guess, as Steve Swink would say. And then, so it's always hard knowing what sort of level everyone is at here. And like when I first started on the project, I'd use Perforce at big studios, but I didn't really know what to use on my own projects. Then through a few game jams, a couple of friends recommended Source Tree as one of the best kind of free source controls around. So I've been using that ever since, and it's not perfect, but I do think it's it seems to do the job pretty well. And I have been looking into Perforce's stuff, because I think for multi-user, as long as you're kind of under like 5 or 10 users, it can be free as well. But I had heard mixed stuff, so I don't know what everyone else's views are on the best source control. But yeah, certainly for a small team, just a couple of us, that seems to have been working pretty well. And then I just wanted to talk quickly about our project management, because that was another thing that I kind of, going into full-time development, I had a bit of experience of how we managed our projects at like Marmalade and some of the other companies. But it's something, there's kind of no real right and wrong way, so it's just figuring out whatever works for you. So far we've been using Trello and just sort of having daily morning catch-ups and then adding all our like tasks and bugs to that. But we also have a fuller production spreadsheet in Google Docs. And now we're kind of breaking down all of the tasks in that. But it's one thing I've really struggled with, because it can get quite unwieldy if you're kind of listing all of your assets in something, and there's so many different pieces of information that you could put for each item. So trying to figure out all of that has been pretty difficult. So I've just been speaking with lots of different people who have production experience, and a couple of people have recommended Gantt charts and things as well, because I think we've got another year of development on the project, and so you're trying to figure out which things are reliant on which other tasks. And when you're working on a small project, it is kind of tricky, because you don't want to if you don't have a full-time producer, then you don't want to be spending days and days kind of knee-deep in spreadsheets, sorting everything out. But if you're not tracking things, then it can be quite easy to kind of slip your deadlines and take much longer than you were expecting to create something. Cool. Would anyone like to have a go on a bit of the game and try out a couple of levels? Anyone feeling brave? No? Okay.
Good.
How are we doing for time?
Yeah, 50 each.
Cool.
Okay, time to show my skills.
Yeah. So we've tried to get a bit of placeholder VO in the game. There's some bits that we've changed, so kind of doesn't necessarily have. So the tutorial has been quite tricky because you don't want to beat people over the head with how to do something, and if you show them, then if they were going to figure it out, then it doesn't feel very special, and you're just kind of robbing them of that moment, because when they figure something out, they it's rewarding, and that's some of the fun. But then other people get really stuck and they can't figure it out, and you don't want those people to get frustrated. So we kind of try and have a system when it will pop up after a certain amount of time if someone hasn't done something. If you're quick, you can do it before the tutorial even appears. This level is actually pretty tricky because we've been changing it to balance stuff.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe this is to do with the extra raycast that we need. That's actually, it should have been jumping, shouldn't it? I think that's.
We changed so many things yesterday.
Right. Okay. I think you're fine. That's
totally
our
not
problem.
me.
Yeah. Technical.
I'm just going to sit down now for 5 minutes.
Yeah. Thank you very much for volunteering. Valiant effort. So we're now working on a vertical slice of the game, which is something. It's really hard to know if it's something we need to do, but we're going to be talking to publishers and people, and you really want the game to look as polished as possible. So I think taking the time to figure out what all the systems are going to be and develop all of those up front is really handy. It does mean that you're sort of taking quite a long while to make not very much content, because you're going to be basically making sort of, 70% of the game or something, just to, 70% of all your systems and things, just to show a very small portion of the game, because our vertical slice is going to be like the first diary level, first story level. But yeah, I think that sort of thing of like figuring out what your final game is going to look like is going to be very valuable for like promoting it as well. And if you want to start making a trailer early or anything, you want to have some really high quality content and stuff for social media as well. On top of speaking to publishers and investors and people. But some people think a vertical slice kind of doesn't really make too much sense, and you might as well just kind of block out the whole game and know what that's going to be, and then bring the whole thing up to final quality later on. But I think, again, it just kind of depends on the different project and what you find works for you. Okay, that's great. Thanks very much.